everything you thought you knew about the Dutton legacy is about to change forever. Because Yellowstone 1944 is not just another spin-off, it's the chapter that could finally reveal the darkest truth behind the ranch, the bloodline, and the power that was never meant to be shared. And now, after years of silence, the official release timeline is starting to take shape. But the real question is, are you ready for what's coming? The announcement of Yellowstone 1944 has quietly shaken the entire fanbase. And if you pay close attention, you can already feel that this story is going to be very different from anything we've seen before. This is not just about continuing a legacy, this is about testing it. Because by 1944, the world itself is changing. War is reshaping families, power is shifting, and the idea of ownership is becoming more dangerous than ever. And right at the center of it all stands the Dutton Ranch, stronger on the outside, but slowly cracking from within. As the official development news begins to surface, one thing becomes very clear. This show is being positioned as one of the most important pieces of the entire Yellowstone timeline. The creators are not rushing it. Instead, they are carefully building something that connects the past pain of 1883 and 1923 to the ruthless dominance we saw later. And that means every decision in 1944 will carry weight. Emotional, violent, and unforgettable. Now, when we talk about the release date, the situation is both exciting and mysterious. While there has been no exact day confirmed yet, all the production signals point toward a late 2027 release window. And this timing actually makes perfect sense, because right now, the studio is focusing on completing multiple projects within the Yellowstone universe before closing a major chapter. This means 1944 is not just being made, it is being saved for the perfect moment. A moment when the audience is ready for a deeper, darker story. And what makes this even more interesting is how quietly this announcement has been handled. There was no massive reveal, no loud promotion, just small confirmations, hints, and insider talks. Almost like they want the tension to build naturally. Almost like they want fans to slowly realize that something big is coming, something that cannot be ignored once it arrives. Because think about it. By 1944, the children we once saw are no longer children. They are grown, shaped by loss, by absence, by decisions they never got to make. And when people grow up in that kind of environment, they don't just protect what they have, they fight for it. Sometimes even against their own blood. And that is where this story becomes dangerous. Because if the release timeline holds true, and if the show arrives exactly when expected, then we are looking at a series that has had years of planning behind it. Years of connecting dots, of building conflicts, of preparing characters for a moment where everything could explode. And when a story is built like that, it does not play safe. It breaks things, it breaks relationships, and sometimes it breaks people. What makes Yellowstone 1944 even more intense is the fact that the world outside the ranch is no longer quiet. War is not just something happening far away. It is something that changes men, changes families, and changes the meaning of loyalty. And when those changes come back home, they don't ask for permission. They take control. So imagine this: a ranch already filled with tension, now facing pressure from outside forces, from within the family, and from a future that refuses to stay predictable. That is the stage being set here. That is the storm that is slowly forming. And the official release announcement, even without exact details, confirms one thing. This storm is coming sooner than people expected. The creators know exactly what they are doing. They understand that this timeline is where everything starts to connect. The emotions get heavier, the conflicts get sharper, and the characters, they stop holding back. Because by this point, survival is no longer enough. Now it's about control. And once control becomes the goal, there are no rules left. So, as we move closer to the official release window, one thing is certain. Yellowstone 1944 is not just another chapter. It is a turning point. A story where decisions will define generations. A story where the past will finally collide with the future. And if this is just the beginning, Then what comes next might be something no one is truly ready for. What makes this chapter so powerful is not just the timeline or the setting, but the emotional damage that has been quietly building for years. The children who once depended on guidance are now grown men carrying unanswered questions, silent anger, and a deep need to prove themselves. And when a family is built on legacy, proving yourself often means taking something from someone else. At the center of this storm stands John Dutton II, no longer a child protected by others, but a man who understands exactly what the ranch means. To him, the Dutton Ranch is not just land, it is identity, power, and survival. Every story he has heard, every sacrifice made before him, has shaped one belief in his mind, that this ranch must stay in his control no matter the cost. But here is where the tension begins to rise, because John is not the only one who believes that. Somewhere else, living with a different truth, is another son of Spencer. A son who did not grow up inside the walls of the ranch, but still carries the same blood. A son who may have been ignored, pushed aside, or even hidden from the main legacy, but never truly removed from it. And now, as time passes, that distance does not weaken his claim. It strengthens his anger. Because when someone grows up feeling like they were denied what was theirs, they don't just want a place in the story. They want to rewrite it. And that is exactly the kind of conflict 1944 is preparing to show. Not a simple disagreement, but a slow, dangerous rivalry between brothers who see the same land in completely different ways. One wants to protect it, the other may want to take it. And right between them stands Spencer, older now, more silent, more complicated than ever. Spencer is no longer the man who reacts quickly or speaks loudly. Life has taken too much from him for that. Instead, he becomes the kind of man who watches, who waits, and who understands that every decision he makes now will decide what happens after he is gone. But here is the problem. There may be no right decision left, because choosing one son could mean losing the other. And in a world like Yellowstone, losing someone does not always mean they simply walk away. Sometimes they come back stronger, more ruthless, more willing to destroy everything in their path. And just when you think this conflict is enough to carry the story, another layer begins to unfold. Elizabeth's child. A name that has been quietly sitting in the background suddenly becomes one of the most important pieces of the puzzle. Because if Elizabeth returns, or if her son steps onto the ranch, then the entire balance of power shifts again. Now, it is not just two sides fighting, it becomes a three-way battle for identity, for recognition, and for ownership. And this kind of situation never ends peacefully, because every claim comes with a story. Every story comes with pain, and every pain demands an answer. What makes it even more intense is the time period itself. 1944 is not a calm year. The world is at war, and that war does not stay outside forever. Men return from it changed, harder, colder, less willing to listen, and more willing to act. And when those men step into an already broken family, they don't fix things. They push them over the edge. So now imagine the Dutton Ranch in the middle of all this, a place filled with history, surrounded by pressure, and controlled by people who are slowly losing trust in each other. That is not just a setting, that is a battlefield. And the most dangerous part is this battle may not be fought with words. Because if we look at what happens in the future of the Yellowstone timeline, we already know one thing. Only one path survives. Only one version of the family continues forward with full control. Which means somewhere in this story, someone loses everything. And in a world like this, losing everything rarely happens quietly. It happens with betrayal, with violence, with choices that cannot be taken back. So as Section 2 builds, the tone becomes very clear. This is not a story about unity. This is a story about division, about brothers turning into rivals, about fathers being forced to choose, and about a legacy that may be too heavy for anyone to carry without breaking. And the most chilling part? This is still just the beginning. Because once these lines are drawn, there is no going back. Only forward into something much darker. By this point in Yellowstone 1944, the Dutton Ranch is no longer just under pressure, it is under threat from every direction. Inside the family, trust is almost gone. Outside the ranch, the world is changing faster than anyone expected. And right in the middle of it all stands a legacy that refuses to bend. John Dutton II is now at a stage where he cannot afford to wait anymore. Watching, observing, and staying silent is no longer an option, because every passing day gives his rivals more time to grow stronger, to build alliances, and to prepare for something bigger. And John understands one thing very clearly. If he does not act first, he may not get a second chance. This is where his character begins to shift, from someone who protects the ranch to someone who is willing to do whatever it takes to keep it. And that change is dangerous, because once a Dutton decides to act without hesitation, the line between right and wrong disappears completely. At the same time, his half-brother is no longer just an outsider with anger. He becomes strategic, calculated, patient in a way that makes him even more unpredictable. Instead of rushing into conflict, he starts building something quietly. Connections, support, maybe even people who believe that the ranch should not belong to just one man. And this is where the story becomes bigger than just family. Because when outside forces start getting involved, the fight for the ranch turns into something else entirely. Power, control, influence. There may be businessmen looking at the land as an opportunity, officials who see it as a resource, and individuals who are willing to take advantage of the division within the Dutton family to weaken them from the inside. Because a divided family is easier to break, and everyone knows it. So now, the Dutton Ranch is not just facing an internal war, it is becoming a target. And Spencer sees it all happening. But the most painful part is, he may be the only one who understands how serious this situation really is. He knows that this is not just about who owns the land anymore, it is about whether the land will even remain in the family at all. And yet, even with that understanding, he cannot stop what is coming, because the damage has already been done. The sons are no longer listening, the past is no longer guiding them, and the future is starting to look like something no one can control. This is also where the emotional weight of the story becomes heavier than ever before. Because behind all the power struggles and silent battles, there is something much deeper. Regret. The kind of regret that builds slowly over time. The kind that comes from things left unsaid, from decisions made too late, and from relationships that were never given a chance to heal. Spencer carries that regret, and it shows, not through words, but through silence. Through the way he watches his family slowly turn into something he never wanted. Through the way he realizes that the legacy he fought so hard to protect may be the very thing that destroys them. And just when it feels like things cannot get more intense. Elizabeth's son enters the picture in a more direct way, not as a distant possibility, but as a real presence, a new player in a game that is already out of control. His arrival does not bring peace. It brings questions. Questions about the past, about what really happened, about what was promised and what was taken away. And unlike the others, he may not carry the same emotional attachment to the ranch, which makes him even more dangerous. Because someone who is not emotionally connected can make decisions without hesitation. And that kind of mindset can change everything. Now the conflict is no longer about two sides. It is unpredictable, unstable, ready to explode at any moment. And this is exactly where Yellowstone 1944 begins to separate itself from everything we have seen before. Because this is not just a slow family drama anymore. This is a story where every move feels like it could trigger something irreversible, something final. Because if we look ahead, we already know that the future of the Dutton family is not built on shared power. It is built on dominance, which means at some point in this story, one side rises, and the others fall. So as Section 3 comes to a close, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. The storm has fully arrived. The calm is gone. The patience is gone. And the people who once called each other family are now standing on opposite sides of a line that should have never been crossed. And once that line is crossed, there is no turning back, only consequences. And when it does not ask for permission. By this stage in Yellowstone 1944, the Dutton Ranch is no longer just a home or a symbol of legacy. It has become something much more dangerous, a prize. A piece of land that now carries too many claims, too many emotions, and too many reasons for people to fight without holding back. John Dutton II is no longer trying to prove himself. He is trying to secure his future. And to do that, he begins making choices that even he may not fully understand yet. Choices that feel necessary in the moment, but slowly start to change who he is becoming. Because when you start believing that everything is at risk, you stop thinking about what is right and start focusing only on what must be done. And once that shift happens, there is no limit left. At the same time, his half-brother is no longer working in the shadows. He steps forward, clear, direct, unafraid. What once felt like a distant rivalry now becomes open confrontation. Words are no longer enough. Warnings are no longer enough. And the space between both sides becomes smaller and more dangerous with every passing moment. Because now, it is not about avoiding conflict anymore. It is about winning it. And right in the middle of this growing chaos, Spencer is forced into the most difficult position of his life. For years, he has carried the weight of the ranch, the memory of loss, and the responsibility of holding everything together. But now, he is being asked to do something even harder, to choose which part of his own bloodline deserves to continue. And that is not a decision a man can make without breaking. Because no matter what he chooses, something will be lost forever. But what makes this moment even more intense is that Spencer may already understand something the others do not. That this fight is no longer just inside the family. It has spread beyond it. Outside forces, which were once watching from a distance, are now moving closer. They see the division. They see the weakness. And most importantly, they see an opportunity. Because when a powerful family begins to fall apart, it creates space for others to step in. Quietly at first. Then, all at once. This could be in the form of land pressure, political influence, or even individuals who are willing to manipulate the situation for their own benefit. And the most dangerous part is, these outside forces do not care about the Dutton legacy. They only care about what they can take from it. So now the ranch is not just under emotional pressure, it is under real threat. And the timing could not be worse. Because inside the family, things are already reaching a breaking point. Elizabeth's son, who once felt like an uncertain piece of the puzzle, now becomes a key factor in everything. His presence forces truths to surface. It challenges decisions that were made in the past. And it adds one more layer to a conflict that was already too complex to control. But unlike the others, he may not be driven by anger alone. He may be driven by clarity. A clear understanding that this fight cannot continue forever, which means at some point, someone will have to end it. The question is, how? Because in a world like Yellowstone, endings are rarely peaceful. They are final, and they come with a cost. As the pressure builds from all sides, the story starts to move faster. Conversations turn sharper, actions become riskier, and the space for forgiveness disappears completely. Every character is now moving with purpose, but those purposes no longer align. They clash. And when they clash, something breaks. It could be trust, it could be loyalty, or it could be something much worse. Because if we look at where this story needs to go, we already know that not everyone makes it out with what they came for. The future of the Dutton Ranch is not shared between many. It is controlled by one path, which means everything we are seeing now is leading toward a moment where that path is decided, a moment where hesitation ends and action takes over, the moment where the future of the Dutton Ranch is decided. By the time Yellowstone 1944 reaches this stage, the atmosphere is no longer uncertain. It is clear, cold, unforgiving. The lines have been drawn, the sides have been chosen, and there is no space left for doubt. John Dutton II stands at the center of it all, not as someone trying to become a leader anymore, but as someone who has already